There are a few things I want to comment on today that I think is important to me. And the first thing I want to draw attention to in my commentary are people that I listen to that I feel inspired by, people that have some in their manner, in their way. This is something, it's not a formula. You cannot act on a formula. It's something that is transmitted in language, in the nuance of language, in the way we speak. I say things to you and the words themselves are like facts and information coming at you, but the intent behind the words is communicated in the way one speaks. I have a trust, a sense that as people, we have an ability to identify intent. Makes us very unique, and I don't know, I can't compare myself to any other creature, but I think it's the aspect within humanity that makes us really extraordinary and incredible, to be able to identify things that aren't just the facts and the information, man. This is why I'm not a facts information person. I create a context. And I want to draw attention to a few YouTubers. I've mentioned them before. One that I'm really beginning to enjoy, enjoy. It's someone who presents me with facts, but the intent behind the fact creates a whole universe of sensibilities. It's kind of like a novel that I'm reading, a novel, and it's Hank McGurk. I'm going to put a link on my, I should have done this a while ago. Hank McGurk, who is a consummate, he has an analytic ability, a consummate analytic ability. I guess it's part of, it's another way of expressing oneself artistically, to be able to identify things analytically and understand stuff. I really appreciate this, and I'm going to put a link to Hank McGurk on the bottom. I'm also going to put a link to another YouTuber, Deborah Mahmoudi, someone that I believe to be very important within the context of this platform. And like I've always said, I attempt to create a context for something that you already know. In other words, we're like sponges. We absorb stuff every day, like huge amounts of information and facts. Just your perception. You open your eyes in the morning and you see stuff coming at you. This all goes in. Where it is stored, I have no idea, because if you look at what is understood to be time, and you take a lot of things in, and if you look at work that I've done over decades of work, I have just a little bit of it there. There's a lot more than that. It's kind of like a storage. We are storage units of things that come into us. Now, what do we do with all that stuff? How do we navigate all this incredible reality, fact, whatever you want to call it? What do we do with that? And a person like McGurk, Deborah Mahmoudi, they have their experience. They have filtered this material that I'm talking about. It's on a certain level, to be crass, it's quite neutral. Anything that we experience in itself is quite neutral, but it goes through a filter, which is our body, which is our being, our emotions, our spirit. And then it comes back. And how does it come back is really important to me. So that, I've said this before, Deborah Mahmoudi was an abused child, an abused person. And you could easily transfer this abuse into a continuation of that pattern of behavior. But for some reason, certain people seem to overcome, in whichever way they do this. Our experiences, the exact same experience, if that's possible, can have completely different results in another human being. And another person I came across, I don't know him either directly, just through the YouTube, but through a mutual, Stephen Shellen knows him. He's interviewed Kevin Annett. I think Kevin Annett is a very important individual within the concept of my understanding of what it means to present yourself to the public. You can just go and hide yourself and be a hermit or whatever. You never have an issue with anyone. But people who present themselves, to me anyway, I come across people now through this medium, YouTube, and just in real life, people have significance and meaning in how they interpret their experiences, like a painting, how they interpret something and give me something to chew on that makes me, I guess, for lack of a better word, feel better about myself. Or even if it's in a desperate kind of feeling that we're having difficulties that make me feel a little bit more capable of handling difficult times. It's kind of like I was revisiting Bukowski, the poet. I call him the poet who exemplifies the passion of despair. Here's an individual who's had his own suffering and difficulties, and I'm not looking at him as an example for me to be like that. But what I appreciate in Bukowski, there is an honesty. Again, I come back to the idea of honesty. I prefer honesty to truth. And Bukowski has an honesty. He surpassed the Beats, all these Kerouac types who were going on about life in some kind of radical, in their radical perception, translated in their poems. Bukowski has a quality that I'm not somebody that can listen to Bukowski or read Bukowski for a long period of time, but there is a sense of intensity of this despair he feels manifested in his work in a real way. It's not fabricated. It's like real. And he said, I think he said in one of his, whether it was in a poem or just in an interview, he said that hatred is their finest art, referring to the general state of being in the art, and in society in general, that hatred becomes a consummate expression in their day-to-day lives in the art. It's like what I find myself to be offended, mortally offended by the art that is being presented to me in museums, and generally what is accepted to be of value as an artistic expression. The hatred in this work is so offensive to me. And I can't explain it away. If you put a shark in formaldehyde, and whatever reason you have, whatever intellectual academic explanations you have, it still is a shark in a goddamn tank of formaldehyde. What is your response? What is your feeling? First of all, when I first saw it, I went into tears. I had this incredible sense of welling up in me of a capitulation to the worst of the worst in humanity. And it's not this bastard, this Hearst, Damien Hirst, this guy who is producing this, has nothing in common with me as an artist. I feel no connection whatsoever. There is a level of capitulating. Okay, let's say that I'm a complete divorced academic, anything, no connection to me as a human being. I analyze this, I still come out at the same point at the other end, that this is an expression of complete and total depravity that is being absorbed into the bosom of our society as cultural epiphanies of some kind. So Bukowski was right that hatred is their finest art, that it's exemplified across the board, whether I go to operas, presentations, contemporary presentations. I went to a presentation of Lucia di Lammermoor by Adam Agoyan, and the brutality of the presentation left me again in this state, this devastated state, this despair, like Bukowski says, or like Bukowski represents, the passion of despair again. And I'm not on board with that. You can discard me. You can just say, okay, he's irrelevant, because we need that kind of level of depravity and despair in our art in order for us to feel anything anymore. I think we can do it in other ways. And now I want to just come, again, I mentioned Hank McGurk, Deborah Mahmoudi, Kevin Annett. I've not seen much of Kevin Annett on the YouTube. I think they've hammered him brutally over the last 10, 15 years. And I recommend you get his books that he has published on the destruction and murder of the Native community here, Aboriginal community in Canada. It still goes on. It hasn't stopped. It still goes on, but it's covered up. It's hidden. Residential schools may not be functioning practically, physically, but the sentiment is still there. So these are people who all I wrap into I cover in a blanket of what I call conscience. All right, so here is my point today. What I wanted a vignette of something that I would like to, every day, I would like to come to like the highest thought in myself at any given day, and I express it in my work that you see behind me, the work that I do as a painter. And this idea that I had today, it's been kind of ruminating within me, is why are we so easily, why are we constantly looking for answers from people who I perceive, I understand in the way they communicate to me, to never have felt that incredible feeling of having been loved? And I'm going to articulate this not just in terms of a human-to-human experience, but something that we recognize within ourselves. I mean, the mere fact of creation itself, what it is that we experience as living entities, is predicated on a phenomenal love experience. I mean, or a love expression, that this is something inherent in being alive. And I understand that we have difficulties, problems, anxieties, fears, all the stuff that afflicts us terribly. This would deflect. Hold on a sec. I'm in the middle. Can I call you back? Okay, I'll call you back. So what is it that connects me to something that makes my experience, my expression valuable to someone else? Regardless of what it is that we've experienced personally, from devastating traumatic events to highlights of bliss and euphoria, I'm saying there's a fundamental base within our nature that unless we have contacted this fundamental base, there is very little value in that which we present or that which we produce in our actions, in our activities, in our thoughts, in the way we see the world, if this base, this fundamental notion that we have been loved, if we cannot produce our expression, our commentary, our ideas, our thoughts, our actions, if they don't come out of this knowledge within ourselves that no matter how difficult our lives may be, unless there is this connection to this feeling of having been loved. Think about it. Think about it. The people, the swamis, the gurus, everybody you listen to, they're just rattling off their mantras of insights and information about the meaning of the cosmos and the universe, but it's like emptiness. It's emptiness. It's like I was listening to Alan Watts, or even somebody like Terence McKenna, people that are inspiring on some level, but it always falls short because I don't get the sense like I do from a person like Deborah Mahmoudi or Hank McGurk, that there is a fundamental notion that they have been loved and are expressing their thoughts and insights based on this feeling within themselves, which makes them valuable to me. This is something, it's like what they could talk total gibberish and rubbish, but fundamentally communicating the sense within themselves, whatever it is like it still has incredible meaning, a lot more than Trump tweeting his meaningless tweets every day, keeping us in his headlights, and the owners want to keep us in their headlights with all their garbage, because basically we're listening to people that have never been loved, and it'll go nowhere. It doesn't go anywhere. It's just dead. It's dead in the water, unless the intent, this, and I'll come to this now, intent. I talk about this, intent. And conscience and honesty is all wrapped up in this feeling, but intent. If the intent is rooted in this feeling of having been loved, your message to me is going to communicate incredibly well. The same way that, and this is an anomaly, if you look, I'll just invoke again Vincent van Gogh, who was a painter who appears to have been so totally unloved in his life experience, but produced incredible work that expressed a sense of having been loved. He never sold a painting in his life. Continued to work. He died young. He was 37. So he couldn't sustain himself very long, contrary to somebody like Bukowski, who was 74. So, different people have different tolerance levels of being able to deal with this sense of despair. The way Bukowski represents to me, he is at a level of expressing despair that it's passionate. So it's a kind of mutation. He transforms despair through his feeling of passion. And I'm not holding him up as any kind of icon for me. I'm just bringing him up because he represents aspects like Van Gogh, who, in spite of their difficulties, managed to draw on this deep well of this feeling of having been loved. And it's not something that is easily continued to live within. It's very difficult because we're discouraged. Every day we're discouraged or we're ignored to look at this aspect of our existence on a day-to-day level. So when you wake up in the morning, as an exercise, something that I do, I say the first thought that comes to my mind is thank you, no matter what. Even though I'm devastated by events around me, something has occurred, I first of all say thank you. And I think this is a fundamental notion that is lost on most people, because we tend to say thank you towards things that we believe we want, or things that we feel we want to possess or own or succeed in, whatever. How about just thank you for being another moment of being alive? Anyway, I think I covered this. There are so many charlatans of the facts and the information and all this kind of stuff that originates out of a level of despair, and there are very few people like Bukowski who can inspire me because they turn it into a passion. So unless you manage to convince me that your sense of not having been loved is actually a love feeling, like Bukowski or Van Gogh, it has very little meaning to me. So whatever your words and your sentences and your comments are, they're of no relevance to you or anyone else unless they come out of that center, that feeling of having been loved. And it's not just person to person, but it's just being within this existence. And I suppose another reflection I have in connection with this is that without this sense, eternity, my suspicion is eternity becomes irrelevant, because we need to recognize this fundamental element that allows us to expand our, I guess, for lack of a better word, consciousness, that our consciousness will remain myopic unless we're able to embrace this. And of course, conscience, what I always talk about, is an incredible tool towards expressing this fundamental element that's within our ability to contact somewhere. Even, I mean, I understand that there are extraordinary circumstances. If you think about people in captivity, or people being abused, tortured terribly, how they come out of this is hard for me to imagine, because I've had a privileged life in that regard. I was not abused that way. I was abused psychologically, from the point of view that, like everybody else, we're taught things that are lies, fundamentally lies. They have no relevance to our existence, just in order to manipulate and to control our activities for the future. And the future is gone. When you have a loveless life, your future will be meaningless. It will descend into an utter and total despair. It's sort of eyes wide shut kind of reality. So it's a loveless world that is only overcome by that ability for us to contact very personally this sense within ourselves, and things develop from there. I guess I've covered. Yeah, I'm looking at my notes. I think I've got it. I got what I wanted to say. Hope that helps. Oh yeah, and one more thing regarding this five-pointed star. And somebody said, you're a Satan worshiper. You are invoking symbols of the occult and all this kind of stuff. All right, yeah, you charlatans, you idiots, you village idiots, not recognizing this five-sided star. It goes back, I guess it goes back Sumerian. And for me, I'll tell you what it is for me, and I'm going to put a little add-on in terms of my own interpretation of this. I've expanded it to include, I was studying Kabbalah for a while, and the six-sided star. But this is the five-sided star. It's the Da Vinci idea, the man, the feeling of the dimension, the dimensional man within this concept, the 5 points. And the way the Cubans and the revolutionaries used this star, a revolution, an inner revolution. I am thinking of Take Me to Cuba as an inner revolution, and then I'll just attach an image that I painted based on this idea on the next level, which is the Hebrew six-sided star. But anyway, it is an expression of resistance to the destruction. It has nothing to do with satanic worship or anything like that. It has to do with the idea of being a revolutionary in your life. Live your life as risking, and I suppose Fidel embraced this star. It's found its way into all the communist countries. It's blasphemous in their rendering of this revolution idea, because it's an inner revolution. It's the way Da Vinci, if anything good came out of Da Vinci, it's the idea that man is represented in the star as a kind of potential, as a kind of geometric, I suppose, a geometric potential of some kind that represents it, but it's the revolutionary idea.